Today we are joined by Mr. Peter Greenberg, American journalist and travel editor of CBS News, who quite recently would have visited our shores aboard the Celebrity Millennium as part of the first cruise to set sail since the pandemic resulted in the halting of such activity. So, Mr. Greenberg, the first thing that we wanted to find out from you, based on interacting with some of those cruise ship passengers and visitors, your assessment of the market for travel, cruise travel to places like Barbados, places like the Eastern Caribbean. We know traditionally American tourists coming to this part of the world are usually more interested in places like the Bahamas, the Dominican Republic, Mexico, Cozumel. What's the market coming out of the pandemic shift?
Well, the interesting thing to note is that in the wake of the pandemic, the expectations and the demands of so many passengers have changed. It's gone from the destination to the process to going to a plan B, something that may not have been on their bucket list. They're looking for a place that's not going to be crowded. They're looking for a place where they can literally breathe, if you'll get that impression. And at the same time, they want to be able to have experiential one-upsmanship and have bragging rights to their friends about going to some place maybe that their friends hadn't gone to before. Barbados seems to check all those boxes. And at the same time, it's now accessible based on the home porting of ships like the Millennium in St. Martin that will then stop in Barbados and in Bridgetown as part of their tour.
Okay. So some of the things that citizens of places like Barbados and in the Eastern Caribbean would want to know is the level of scrutiny being placed on cruise ship passengers. How free of an environment is it? What are the measures that are being put in place, not necessarily just in theory, but in practice while you were on the Millennium?
Well, there are the theories and practices that happen before anybody boards the ship. And of course, then there are the practices that happen, the protocols and the rules after you're on board. So let's start with the before part. They're very, very strict about who gets on the ship. All crew has to be vaccinated. All officers have to be vaccinated. All passengers have to be vaccinated. So what you have is a 100% vaccination compliance, which is a far cry from the image that people thought about 15 months ago when they thought of cruise ships as floating petri dishes. This is probably the safest place to be. But the protocols don't just start there, they continue. You have to wear a mask to get on the ship. You have to wear a mask to get off the ship. Once you're on the ship, all the crew is wearing masks. In public areas, hand sanitizers are everywhere. In areas where you're going to eat, they've installed special washing stations for you to be able to wash and clean your hands before you ever touch any food. And speaking of touching food, one of the distinctions of a cruise ship, in fact, in many cases it's a trademark, is the cruise ship buffet. The buffet is still there, but it's been redefined so that you approach a buffet station and you point to what you want, but then a crew member who is appropriately masked and gloved will then plate it for you, and then you can take it there. So no passengers are touching utensils at buffet stations. No passengers are touching food at buffet stations. And I can tell you from the experience that I had, nobody was complaining. I especially was not complaining because you'll understand the concept of a buffet. For the first time in a long time, I was not overloading my own plate.
Okay, so what about some of the protocols on island? We're told that what the cruise ships and the islands participating are interested in doing is providing a bubble type of an environment. Not exactly sure what that means. What exactly can tourists expect when they leave the ship? And how palatable is it based on the myriad of things that we know cruise ship tourists like to do when they step off of a ship onto a destination?
Well, it's essential, at least in the short term, that they do create that bubble environment. So if you want to do a shore excursion, you're going to do it in an escorted fashion. It will be rigidly controlled. You'll be put on buses that have been vetted with social distancing. You're going to locations and experiences that have already been pre-approved and have been inspected. You're not doing so in large crowds. You're not going to be able to go off the ship and explore the port on your own, which is somewhat frustrating for me, but that's part of the deal you have to agree to on these initial cruises. Are they having a good time when they do it? The answer is yes, because they're still seeing things for the first time. They're just doing it under different circumstances, and it's smaller numbers. Keep in mind that a ship like the Millennium has a capacity of over 2,100 passengers. The passengers on the cruise I was on, that number was 648. The crew outnumbered the passengers 2-1. It was a great deal for the passengers because there were 2 staff members for every passenger. The service was amazing. The conversations were amazing. Social distancing was already baked in because you didn't have a full ship. And for the moment, that's a great way to go.
And how sustainable is that, though? We're told 30% on the Millennium, and we're told that many other vessels won't be traveling with more than about 50% capacity. Is that sustainable? How long can cruise liners keep this up?
Well, let's use the restaurant example. The restaurants during the pandemic, if they were open at all, were at 25% capacity, then different municipalities would change the regulations as vaccine levels increased to 30, 35, 40, 50. I'm speaking to you today from New York, where we're at 100% capacity now. That doesn't mean they're going to fill because they're still doing social distancing inside. The same thing applies to the cruise ships. You can't sustain 25 or 30% capacity in the long term. Everybody knows that. But there's a reason for that now, because they wanted to do this essentially as a test cruise to make sure that all the systems were in place, all the rules were being followed, the behaviors were acceptable, and then little by little, you increase the numbers. You open up the faucet a little bit so that you don't fall victim to, even with the best of intentions, people not understanding what the rules are.
Okay. And from your experience as a travel writer, as a travel journalist, when can we expect for things to, pick up full steam ahead? We know that the summer months for us in Barbados aren't exactly peak, but we expect that around October, November, December, that things should pick up. What are the market indicators telling us?
Well, I actually think it's going to be faster than that. It's moving right now exponentially. Every airplane that I've been on has been full. That includes into and out of Barbados, by the way, sometimes even oversold. And the cruise lines could fill them today if they wanted to. They're making the decision intentionally not to and to increase it slowly. But I wouldn't wait till October to see that. I'm estimating by the end of July, you're going to see full cruise ships in almost every market in the Caribbean, even if it isn't high season, because you're dealing with pent-up demand over 15 months of repeat dedicated cruisers who can't wait to get back on their ships.
Okay. And the final question from me, I believe that it will only be a matter of time until quite a number of other destinations, as they get their COVID-19 situations under control, will start to, market themselves as similar destinations. What do we need to do here in Barbados and across the Caribbean, the Eastern Caribbean especially, to maintain the head start that we have and the level of competitiveness that would allow us to keep the great portion of the market that we're able to currently have?
Well, the best thing I can say for you guys is you've already been leading by example. You just need to continue to do that, to be responsible, to be rigid, to let everybody know that you're caring about people, not just in terms of getting them there, but also getting them home. It's not what people are talking about, it's what people are thinking about. And what they're thinking about is, I really want to go to Barbados, but I don't want to get stuck there and not be able to get home. Now, they may not be telling you that, but that's what they're thinking about. So if you can get cruise passengers there safely, happily, and have a great experience, word of mouth will do the rest. The bottom line right now is everybody's doing their homework, they're behaving, and as long as you can continue to do that, your numbers are only going to increase. Okay,
one more question, if you will, and that's in relation not just to cruise, but to tourism in general. How do all of these same rules apply? We know that there are persons who are expected to come for longer stays, persons who might be interested in working and living in Barbados for extended periods. How do we continue to stay competitive in the broader market beyond just cruises?
Well, initially you stayed competitive because you were accessible. Now you have to stay competitive because you need to be affordable. If you can get that balance together, it's a win-win.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Peter Greenberg, American journalist and travel editor at CBS News. Thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be with you. Thanks.